All right, so we pulled the clamps off the neck blank this morning. Neck looks great. So we'll get to marking out a scarf joint today. We'll make a cut. I do my scarves at 14 degrees. To be honest, off the top of my head, I don't remember what some other name builders do, but I'll go through how to mark out and cut a scarf joint here in a little bit, and then hopefully we'll get the scarf joint cut, fit, and glued today. That'll allow me, you have to do the scarf joint before you cut out your truss rug. And so there's a few steps until you can get the neck. That's what takes the neck so long, is there's so many glue steps that it takes days. We're also going to see if we can't joint together the body. We're going to go with the figure on the center look. So this will be the back. And so I need to clean up these edges right here. Usually what I'll do is run them, I've got a big hand plane that I'll clean these up with. I've got a jointer, but it's not as precise as I'd like. And sometimes I come back with just a square piece of wood that I've got some adhesive sandpaper stuck to. That's the best way to get a really clean joint. And I'll go through that later today if we get to it. I'm also going to book match the top today. And so my bandsaw isn't wide enough to take the top, so I'm going to have to do it by hand. I've already marked out the center, and some people don't know this, but there's actually a scoring tool inside of your contractor squares. So I pulled that out, and basically you set the center and then you score it at the center. And so I'm going to use this rip saw and hopefully get a real clean cut down the center so I have enough room to play with on the tops. We'll open it up, and that'll get glued on top of this once everything's all glued together. I'll glue these two together, I'll glue those two together, and then I'll sand them flat before I join them, and I'll probably hog out some material from the back just to lighten it up. This quilted maple is actually really a lot lighter than the harder stuff, the sugar maple I get up here. And this neck has a little bit of a work to it, just a little bit. Fortunately, it's about where I'm going to cut that scarf cut anyway, so it doesn't matter. This blank is a little more than an inch, and so that gives me tons of room to play with. Once I put this fretboard on top of it, which is about a quarter, I had the blade wandered a little bit, so I've got a fatter side. I need to thickness this so it's even, but the fretboard's going to be within this by a lot. It'll probably be something like that. I don't know. We'll get to it. So here I've got my top, and with these saws, they're rip blade. Ripping is when you cut with the grain. Cross-cutting is when you cut against the grain. So I'm ripping this in half so that we can book match it. I'm using the aggressive blade side of the saw, and you score out the line that you want the saw to follow, and then you slowly go at each corner just in and follow your two lines, and you can get a really clean, easy cut. You don't need to overwork yourself. Japanese saws, the teeth grab on the pull, and it helps my shoulder. I've got bad shoulders, and these are just so much, they feel so much easier than traditional American saws. So I really like these Japanese saws. Hopefully we'll get this cut out, and then we'll come back and get to some of the other more interesting parts of today. Woo! All right, I got the top cut out, and oh my god, that took forever. Book matching by hand is a nightmare. You have to be so slow and it's a nightmare. So here's our top. It looks like, I'll have to look at it. Let's see, did it come apart this way? Yeah. So this is going to be the top. I need to joint these edges a little bit better. And again, to joint edges, you can use a joiner, but I find they're not as precise as they should be. Or I've set mine up 1,000 times, and it always ends up not being a clean line. And so I just use one of these dowels from Home Depot. It's like $2. They're usually an inch square. And you put some 80 grit sandpaper on the side. Then I just hold down my piece and do this sort of thing. It gives you a really straight, even, square edge to work with. And I'll just put some pencil shavings on here just to make sure I'm getting the whole thing. And again, this is going to be the top. So the seam where these two meet is only really going to be noticeable down here at the bottom. And so that's really where you want to focus on making sure that the joint between the two sides is really clean. Up here, you know, there's going to be a pick guard. The neck's going to come to about right there. You're going to have pickups and stuff. So just sit here and do this until those pencil marks go away. See? And so I can see I'm kind of high on this side. Won't take very long. So we've got the top ready to go. I've also started to joint the sides. We're going to go with quilting in the middle. So this will be the back, actually. And this guitar is going to be so pretty. We'll probably go with that. Oh my gosh. I don't know if that's going to come through in the video. But it is just insane how much quilting is on this. So I'm going to make sure I maximize the quilting where there aren't going to be, you know, cover issues, like the pick guard, for instance. The neck turned out pretty good. The truss rod isn't going to come in the mail for a couple of days, so I'm going to go ahead and focus on the body, get the body done. I do still need to cut a scarf joint. This is going to be the back of the neck, the part that you hold. There's a few imperfections on this side, and that happens all the time. Fortunately, one of the sides you're just going to cover with fretboard anyway. You're going to cut a truss rod in it, and so I make sure to pick the side that's, you know, less of an issue as far as look and inclusions, and that's the back. So to carve out your truss rod, which is I think what I'm going to do next, again I do 14 degrees, and so I just figure out where I need my headstock. My headstock is like 7 inches. I need about 7 inches or so. And I've got some templates that I use, something like this. And so I'll just figure out, okay, that's going to be enough. Mark a line. And then, since this will be the top, you know, draw in my angle. We'll come back, I'll cut my angle, and then you flip it and glue it together, and I use side dots. Crimson Guitars, Ben Crow Crimson Guitars. You've got to check his stuff out. His videos are so informative, and he's got great tips and ideas, and he talks about tooling and all sorts of stuff. But he mentioned that they use the fret side dots as indexing pins, and it actually works really well. I was surprised at how well how rigid they are, because they're just like these little pieces of plastic, and they're so small that when I use an indexing pin to glue the fretboard on, I mean I'll literally put one of those through a fret slot. You never see it. It's really neat. So maybe we'll get to the fretboard today, but I'm going to focus on cleaning these bodies up and deciding, you know, how I want to orient them, and then making sure that these seams are really clean. The way you do that is you take the two sides that you want to have jointed together, and you look through to see if light shines through. So I'll get a bright, light, and I'll sit here and go through, and then you mark the spots where you see the light, and you sand everywhere else. Those are the high spots. So, on a microscopic level, it might look as straight as this, but once you get into, really looking at it, you might see little curves here and there, and so you want to shave off the peaks of those curves so that it really fits together. And as long as you've got two really flat, really clean surfaces, that wood glue will hold anything together. And so there is no warping in this. This is going to be a lot easier to sand flat. Because once I get these two pieces glued together, this has to be perfectly flat, and then the back of this has to be perfectly flat, so that when I glue them together, the seam along the side will disappear. And that's the benefit of using the same board. This is all the same wood from the same tree, even from just the same board. And so the entire guitar is going to have the same tonal quality. As far as color, the tone of it, it's going to be really pretty. This Purple Heart's going to set it off. I'm real excited at how neat these pinstripes are going to be. So hopefully I'll get to gluing up the body today. Then we'll start carving and cutting the body. No, we'll glue up the body, we'll sand them, thickness them, and then I'll probably cut some holes out of the backside, inside here to relieve some of the weight. I'll use a drill press and a Forstner bit. Then we can turn to the neck, get your truss rod installed, do the scarf joint for the headstock, cut off my heel cap, and then start working on how many frets we're going to use, do some of the fret slotting, bind the fretboard, and then run it over and clean up the bridge hasn't even come in yet, so I can't map out the fretboard. I'm going to make this nut out of a piece of staghorn that Nolan's going to send me, but I've got a piece of horn here, and so I have a standard nut width that I like to use right here. It's a Gibson width. I think it's like 42 millimeters or something like that. So I've got this end, but until you have the bridge, I can't line out my string spacing. And that's imperative to drawing the lines of your fretboard, because you want your fretboard to have, it's 3/16 or like a couple of millimeters of overhang on the sides, so that when the strings follow the fretboard, you've got a little bit of room on each side. And you want that room to be even throughout. You don't want to have more room at the bottom than at the top, and so you have to know the angle of the string spacing to do that. I also need the bridge to define how deep my neck pocket's going to be. I'll end up cutting a tenon out of this once we get to that stage, and I'll show you guys how I do that, but that'll dictate how deep we're going to go in. How high the neck and the fretboard is actually going to sit above this face, and show you guys how archtop guitars are real similar to what I do, and I add, for instance, on this guitar, the tenon goes to about here, and so this would have been a floating fretboard had I not glued in some little splices of the same type of wood right here to hide that. And you find that in archtop guitars. Some people like a floating fretboard, where from here all the way around the fretboard appears to be floating, and you can cover some of that up with the pickguard. But I like the uniform look. It's what you would expect from a guitar that you buy at the store, for instance. But this is almost finished. I still need to get my headstock inlay so I can finish this guy. But this is one of my first guitars that I'll be able to have for inventory. I have a problem with getting customers, and so I build custom guitars for customers ahead of inventory for myself. Turns into a problem because I just don't have guitars to let people play on. They just kind of have to take me at face value. I have a couple. I'm thinking about putting them for sale on my website. I've got a Telecaster that I might put on there. I don't know. Right now it's the only guitar that I can put in somebody's hands. until I finish this Strat. And I'm way more excited to have somebody play that Stratocaster than the Tele that I made a couple of years ago. So stay tuned. I'm going to get this stuff glued up, and hopefully I'll have maybe get to a scarf joint video in this installment. Probably not. I really want to focus on getting the body blanks glued together. And yeah, thanks for stopping by.